The atmosphere in the sleek glass-walled boardroom was thick with tension, a tangible silence hanging in the air as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sunlight streamed in through the high windows, reflecting off the polished surface of the enormous oak table where the most influential figures in the company sat. At the head of the table was the CEO, a sharp-eyed man named Charles Davenport, known for his steely resolve and commanding presence. His salt and pepper hair was impeccably groomed, but today, his tightly clenched fists and stormy glare revealed a rare crack in his composure. Before him lay a stack of documents, not just any papers, but critical contracts that held the future of the company in the balance. The problem was, every sheet was written entirely in German. No one in the room dared admit they couldn't understand a word. The foreign investor from Berlin, a calm yet imposing figure named Herr Klaus Weber, watched quietly, his piercing gaze hopping from one executive to the next, patiently waiting for an answer. Yet none came. Minutes slipped by explosively slow, beads of sweat forming at the temples of these otherwise confident leaders, betraying their unease. The silence stretched on until Charles could no longer contain his frustration. With a thunderous slam of his palm on the table, he cut through the stillness, his voice sharp as a whip. Is there no one at all in this company who can read German? The question was not rhetorical, but held a weight of desperation. His sharp words sent a ripple through those gathered. Careers teetered on the brink, reputations threatened to unravel in an instant. The hum of whispered speculations filled the room, but no helpful voice emerged. Just when it seemed the situation could not grow any tenser, a single soft voice floated from the back of the room, fragile yet imbued with quiet strength. "Excuse me, sir." Eichen heads turned sharply, eyes wide with disbelief and curiosity. The words hadn't come from a senior executive, nor from a well-dressed assistant. Instead, they emerged from a young woman named Clara. She was barely in her mid-20s, wearing a modest gray uniform topped with a white apron, her dark hair pulled back in a tidy braid. Clara held a tray of water glasses, her hands steady despite the attention now focused on her. The CEO's incredulous gaze locked onto her as murmurs swept the room like a rising tide. Clara had been serving drinks silently for the last hour, invisible to the power players wrapped up in their high-stakes world. But now, all eyes were on her. Her heart pounded fiercely, but she gathered her courage and stepped forward. Clara was no ordinary waitress. Behind her quiet demeanor lay a tapestry woven from resilience, sacrifice, and unyielding hope. Raised in a small town just outside Vienna, her parents were hard-working, humble people, her father a carpenter, and her mother a school librarian. They dreamed of a brighter future for Clara, one filled with education and opportunity, encouraging her from a young age to learn languages. Yet fate had dealt her family a harsh hand. When Clara was barely a teenager, her father fell gravely ill, and mounting medical expenses shattered their hopes. Eventually, they emigrated to the United States, chasing the promise of a new beginning. But the road was far from easy. Clara juggled 2 jobs, waiting tables in a busy downtown cafe by day, cleaning offices late into the night, while also quietly nurturing a deep love for languages. Despite exhaustion, she poured herself into late-night study sessions with worn textbooks and online tutorials, softly practicing German, French, and even Italian. For her, language was more than words. It was a lifeline, a means to remind herself of her worth beyond the apron she wore. Now, fate had cast her into an unexpected spotlight. With a steadying breath, she gathered the German documents from the CEO's table. The weight of dozens of eyes bore down on her, some filled with doubt, others with faint hope. Clara's fingers traced the lines of text as she silently translated them in her mind before speaking aloud. At first, her voice fluttered uncertainly, but soon it gained strength and clarity, flowing effortlessly from her lips. One sentence led to the next with precision, her translation opening the room like a window to a world no one else could reach. The tension dissolved into fascination. The investor's lined face softened into a rare smile, impressed by her fluency. Board members leaned forward, utterly captivated by the transformation of what seemed an impossible situation. Even Charles, the stern CEO who had moments ago seemed ready to explode, now regarded her as if seeing her for the first time, his eyes flickering with newfound respect. As Clara continued, an almost electric calm settled over the room. What had begun as panic was now awe. Finally, Herr Weber nodded approvingly and addressed Clara personally in German. Ausgezeichnet. Your translation is impeccable. She blushed but met his gaze confidently, replying fluently, Danke schön. It's my pleasure. The heavy silence that followed was no longer suffocating but filled with a profound respect. Clara had done what no executive could, rescued a pivotal meeting and unknowingly changed the course of many futures that day. What none of them realized was the immense courage it took for Clara to step forward. Years of whispered doubts, harsh judgments, and invisible boundaries had tried to define her worth. But in this moment, Clara showed that no one is ever just a role or a uniform. Every person holds the power to surprise, to rise, and to shine. The moment Clara finished her translation, a profound silence settled over the room once more. But this time it was different, filled with reverence rather than fear. Charles Davenport leaned back in his chair, the rigid tension in his shoulders finally easing, replaced by something akin to awe. The executives exchanged glances, some faces flushed with a mixture of shame and admiration. Those who had assumed Clara's place in the hierarchy had rendered her invisible were now forced to reconsider their assumptions. It was a humbling lesson. Brilliance and capability do not come dressed in tailored suits or padded resumes, but often in humble packages that society overlooks. Seeing this, Herr Klaus Weber, the foreign investor, acknowledged the breakthrough with a warm nod, gesturing for Clara to join him at the head of the table. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, yet she stood tall, her voice steady as she answered his questions about the nuances buried in the contract. What followed was not just a matter of language, but of cultural understanding. A bridge Clara instinctively built, connecting two worlds that often struggled to find common ground. Charles, who had spent years struggling with misunderstandings that jeopardized deals, now saw the invaluable asset within their own company walls. He asked Clara to share her background, and the room hushed again as she recounted her journey, from the quiet town on Austria's outskirts to the relentless hustle of American city life. She spoke of her father's illness, the sacrifices her family made, and how the love for languages became her refuge and beacon. The executives listened, some stiffening as they grappled with the truth of privilege and opportunity, others inspired by Clara's resilience. In a sweeping gesture, Charles dismissed the rest of the meeting that day, inviting Clara to stay behind. There, in his office bathed in late afternoon light, a conversation sparked that would change her life. Charles offered her a role beyond servitude, a chance to become the company's official translator and cultural liaison, elevating her from the margins to a position of influence and respect. Tears welling in her eyes, Clara accepted, overwhelmed by the validation she had silently yearned for. Her story would no longer be one of invisibility, but one of impact. Over the weeks that followed, Clara blossomed in her new role, not simply decoding language, but interpreting intent and fostering genuine understanding. Her empathy became her greatest tool, allowing her to navigate delicate negotiations with grace and insight. She reminded the executives through her example that business was not merely about contracts and profits, but about people, their stories, dreams, and struggles. And despite her newfound status, Clara never forgot where she came from. She continued to visit the cafe where she had worked, greeting old colleagues with warmth and sharing her journey as a beacon of hope. Her story became a legend whispered among the company's corridors, a powerful reminder that true talent and courage are often found where one least expects them. Even Charles Davenport, once a man hardened by corporate battles, would smile when recounting the day Clara, the unassuming waitress, saved their future and taught them all a valuable lesson about patience, humility, and the transformative power of believing in others. In a world that often values appearances over substance, Clara's courage illuminated a simple truth. Every individual holds within them extraordinary potential, waiting for the right moment to shine. And when that moment comes, even the quietest voice can echo through the halls of power and change everything.